Alright. Does it look weird if I'm sitting like this? Hello! Welcome back to Tayrock Rockin Well, the podcast. I am your host, Taylor Rockwell, and today we're in the tiny house! If you are just listening, I am currently sitting on a couch that doubles as a twin bed, and a window is behind me, and there's a good view, but I don't want to mess with the lighting. And if you're watching the YouTube video, this is kind of just a glimpse of the tiny house. I am going to be doing a full tiny house tour here shortly on my YouTube channel. So if you want to see like the inside of a tiny house and kind of like what it's like to be in a tiny house, I'm going to make a video really quick and here shortly. So be on the lookout for that. But regardless of that, welcome everybody. If you are new, my name is Taylor and I am an entrepreneur helping other entrepreneurs and go-getters start their business or create a good, healthy mindset to basically go ahead and go further in all of your business or investing ventures. I am a business owner, I am an investor, and I do a whole lot of other things, so welcome. If you have any questions or comments throughout this entire podcast, feel free to DM me Taylor Rockwell Taylor_Rockwell on Instagram. With that being said, I did have one of you message me on Instagram saying, wait, don't skip over chapter 2A and go to chapter 3. Can you make an episode just on 2A? So for today's episode, we are doing book club again on You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. I am reading this book for everybody who wants to read a book alongside me and then have a conversation weekly about it. I'm also reading this book and making these episodes for those of you who want to read and want to gain the knowledge of reading, but might just find yourself in a predicament of maybe not having or making time to read, or you feel like you can't read because you don't really comprehend what you're reading. Whatever the reason is, I'm going to read this book for everyone who wants to read it or anyone who doesn't want to read it but still wants to know what this book is all about. This book I read 2 years ago and it really did change my life, and I'm reading it for a second time and I'm gaining so much more information from it the second time around. So I'm loving this segment. How are you guys? Are you loving this segment? Anything new going on for all of my listeners? I love when you guys message me on Instagram and tell me what's new in your life. It really does feel like my community is getting bigger and bigger, and I appreciate it so much. What's new in my life? I am closing on my first investment property this Wednesday or Thursday. This is my biggest investment to date. It is close to $1 million investment, and I feel anxious. I feel excited. I feel a little nervous, and also I feel very confident all at the same time. I'm going to make a whole video, a whole podcast about this investment in particular. Basically, how did I afford $1 million investment? I feel like so many people, make like, oh, this is what I'm doing, but they don't make content on how they did it. And I want to share with you guys how I did it, how I'm doing it, and hopefully it sparks some inspiration or some confidence in you to also do something similar if that is where your desires lie. But more on everything in a future episode. I'm going to be making that episode here shortly. But that is just kind of new and exciting in my life. Other things new and exciting, I'm still waiting to take my real estate exam. I'm just waiting for my background check to clear and my fingertips, everything to go through. Once that is all done, then I can take my exam. So I'm waiting to do that as well. But that's about all that's new in my life. And I'm so excited to be here with you guys the day after Halloween and to be getting cozy with book club. So let's just jump right in. Enough jibber jabber. Like I said, I want to go over just chapter 2A today and not chapter 3. Next week, we will go over chapter 3. And I agree to whomever messaged me saying, let's just go over 2A. once I started reading 2A, I kind of was like, oh, I understand why they want to just go over 2A, because there was a lot of information specifically revolving around manifesting that I think we should probably cover, considering this is like the basis of the book, is manifesting money. So chapter 2A is titled A Tiny But Mighty Chapter About Universal... It's that kind of day, I guess. A tiny but mighty chapter about universal intelligence. Now, when I first read this book, that was the first time I've ever heard about the term universal... Oh my gosh, why can't I say the word? Universal intelligence. And after reading a little bit more about it in this book, I then started to see universal intelligence all over, and it started to just kind of... It was one of those things, like, once you hear a new word, and then you just notice everybody else knows that word, and you're kind of like, how did I go my entire life not knowing that word? So I wanted to kind of break down universal intelligence. Oh my gosh, am I going to do that the entire podcast? I guess so. So, I do have all of my little stickies to go over, but let's go ahead and talk about what is universal intelligence. And on page 51, Jen says, there's no lack of opinions and theories when it comes to the universal intelligence that created and continues to create all that exists. So she goes on to essentially explain what is manifesting and how does it work and how does it tie into universal intelligence. And she explains that everything around you is vibrating, right? This microphone right in front of me is vibrating. The foods you eat are vibrating. The car you drive, yourself is made of molecules that are constantly vibrating. And all of those vibrations affect you in one way or another, whether you realize it or not. So the trick to manifesting is essentially to ride it, feel it, own it, and kind of bring yourself to a certain vibrating level to align yourself with the things that are vibrating around you. I don't know if that makes entire sense, but essentially it's like, let's say you want to manifest a new car. And it sounds like a little hippity-doo-dah, I know, but it kind of works. So maybe take it with like a grain of salt before you write it off entirely. But let's say you want a new car. And for me, my dream car for a long time was a Tesla. And so let's just say Tesla vibrates at X, right? A certain number. And when I was manifesting a Tesla, my goal was to allow myself to vibrate at a similar level to align myself with a Tesla. So I would do certain things in my life this is silly, but there's this song and it's by Russ, and one of the lyrics is, "That ain't a Nissan, that's a McLaren." And I just thought it was so interesting because I used to drive a Nissan Sentra before my Tesla. And I used to play that song so loud, and I used to be like, that ain't a Nissan, this is a McLaren. But in my head, I was like, I can't wait until I'm driving my Tesla. And I would imagine in those moments what it was like for me to drive my Tesla. I would really just be like, pretend like I was like already driving a Tesla around town, going to my Target trips. And I really started to just like own what it felt like to be a Tesla, to be driving a Tesla. And now I have a Tesla, obviously. It is something that I manifested. I don't think it's something that I necessarily just like happened to be like, oh yeah, today I'll get a Tesla. It's like, no, I've been manifesting a Tesla for years and I finally have one. But at the time, it was a lot more work than just, oh yeah, one day I'll get a Tesla. I would like really feel it and be like, that ain't a Nissan, that's a McLaren, whatever, like little things. But essentially I was getting my energy, my spirit to align myself with being able to drive a Tesla. And so that's kind of what she talks about in this first chapter of 2A, is making sure that you understand that everything's vibrating and your goal is to align yourself with those vibrations. And then on page 53, I put another little sticky that I thought was important. And let me open these notes real quick. Okay, so on page 53, the quote is, "You may not understand the interactics of how it all works, but still, you're totally down with following the rules. I want to encourage you to follow suit with the information I'm giving you now. Put it into practice as you embark on becoming rich and let the results speak for themselves. Because trust me, once you start experiencing how powerful your thoughts and the universal intelligence are, even though you may not totally grasp the entire WTF of everything involved, you'll be down with the program when you're rolling in the dough." So I made a little note in my journal talking a little bit about that quote. And essentially I put, "You define your own narrative and your own perspective of your reality with your thoughts." And then I put, "How do you perceive yourself, others, your stories, your narrative?" So I guess my little note and what I was trying to say is how you hold yourself and how you present yourself to the universe, to others, to even your own self-confidence, your own, perspective on how you view yourself is essentially how you become. And it's as similar to manifesting in terms of if you always say you're rich, or if you always say you're broke, if you don't have money, if you always are putting yourself down, being like, I can't afford that, blah, 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 blah. Essentially, you're telling yourself that, and your own what is the word I'm looking for? Your own, way you look at yourself becomes similar, where you look at yourself as a broke person. You look at yourself unworthy of being able to afford certain things in your life, and so do the other people around you. You essentially set that standard that everyone around you is also going to look at you as someone who doesn't have money, or someone who can't afford things. Like maybe they want to invite you on a trip, but they're like, oh, I'm not going to invite Taylor. She always says she's broke. I don't want to put her in that situation. When in reality, you probably do have money and you probably could go on this trip with them, but now you just lost out on that opportunity, all because you created this narrative that you were broke and everyone around you is essentially believing that narrative. And I kind of think it's like the opposite. When I started to own my narrative, the narrative that I wanted to have, the narrative that I do have, it's only just a perspective shift. And I started to tell myself, like, I am going to be really rich in this lifetime. I am going to be really wealthy. And I started acting like it. I knew how to invest and I knew how to get started. I knew the steps I needed to take, but I wasn't willing to do it. And I kind of would be scared or unsure. And for a long time, I was like, oh, I can't call myself an investor because I don't really invest in anything but casual stock market stuff. And I don't really do anything. I do everything traditional: get married, go to college, buy a house. I'm not doing anything outside the box. So for a long time, I kind of created this narrative that I'm just doing what I need to do just to do it, I guess. And then all of a sudden I was like, that's not my narrative I want. Like, I want to be an investor. I want to make money moves. I want to be successful at the businesses I'm creating. And then I kind of got this ego, this confident boost. But most importantly, the ego and the confidence boost was more me ensuring myself, my perspective of myself, that that's who I actually am. And then when I got that confidence, when I started boosting my ego, is when I got the confidence essentially to sell my house, get the money from my house, start building on my long-term dreams of investing in real estate. I got my I'm soon about to get my real estate license. I'm about to be more involved in the industry of real estate. I want to really educate myself. And once I started to just own, I'm a business owner, and I stopped feeling insecure about saying that. For whatever reason, I used to feel so insecure about saying oh yeah, I own a business. But now I'm way more oh yeah, I own a plant business, and I also do real estate, and I also do investments, and I also do this. And it's true. None of it is lying. It's all of what I do. And I feel where sometimes it might feel like I'm lying is in terms of I'm not where I want to be yet. Yes, I have a plant business, but it's not where I want it to be yet. And yes, I'm about to get my real estate license, but I haven't sold my $1 million of real estate yet. Yes, I want to be an investor, but I only have one investment property and I want 20 and I don't have 20 yet. But the fact is that is who I am, and that's who I want to be, and that's who I'm going to push forward. So I'm just owning that person, and I'm just being more confident about that person. And I noticed once that person started to be confident and I started to kind of hold myself in that way and start talking more openly about it on my platforms, is when I started to shift my narrative, and when my narrative started to become, oh, Taylor is a successful entrepreneur. Taylor is a successful business owner and an investor, and she does this and she does that. And it starts with like my friends noticing my narrative changing. My friends start almost respecting me in terms of the narrative that I'm writing for myself, and they start also coming to me on that level. They start getting on my wavelength of how I want to be treated and how I want to be perceived, essentially. And I just think that I kind of got a little off track, but to bring it back is understand that the narrative that you have of yourself is how the narrative of others will perceive you. So what you speak out to the universe is what will come back, and what you speak out to others is how they will treat you back. So I want to just kind of make you think for a minute. What am I putting out in the universe? And how do others perceive me? And how do I perceive myself? And then kind of think, is that how I want to be perceived? Is that how I want other people to perceive my narrative? Is that how I want to perceive myself? Do I want to always be talking down on myself and being upset about X, Y, and Z? Or do I want to completely change my narrative and do other things? And I'm talking about money in particular because that's what the book is about. But there's things that I do in my daily life all the time where I start realizing where I'm creating a bad narrative. For example, sometimes I feel insecure about my face. I know that sounds weird, but sometimes I feel like my lips are really small, and sometimes I feel like my skin is really dewy, oily, and just all over the place, and it makes me have this underlying insecurity of just feeling unconfident, and I start to feel upset and start to feel just unconfident, insecure, really. And then all of a sudden when I start feeling that way, I'm like, do I really feel that way? In reality, I think I'm actually a really pretty person, and my lips are small, and I could get lip filler, which I might, to help with that insecurity. But then sometimes I look at them, I'm they're actually really cute, and they have really good shapes, and they're pointy, and they're nice, and then I go back, and then I'm and my skin is actually really clear compared to what it was when I was a teenager, and I had cystic acne all over my face, and I'm actually really pretty, and I think I'm attractive, and I start kind of revamping that weird narrative that I'm pushing onto myself, that I'm unpretty, that my skin's ugly, and that my lips are tiny. And then all of a sudden I take those exact same things and I just flip them on their head. My lips are actually really cute, and my skin is actually really nice and dewy, and I do practice religious skincare, and I should be proud of the skin I have today. And then also my face, I think I'm really attractive in terms of how, I don't know, I just think I'm good looking. So then I kind of take those exact same insecurities and I flip my narrative, and then just flipping my narrative allows me to be more confident. When I'm putting on my makeup, I feel I put it on softer. I'm I'm Bella Hadid, you know what I mean? And I know it's silly to think about, but it's powerful. So ask yourself, what is the narrative I'm creating of myself, and how can I change that? So that's my little TED Talk right there. But also, I had another little quote on page 54. And, okay, before I go to page 54, she breaks the concept of universal intelligence into two categories. And one is outgoing thought, and another is incoming thought. And so, starting with outgoing thoughts, on page 54, she says, nothing happens or comes to be without being thought first. Our staggering solar system, your favorite song, the amount of money in your bank account, all of it. Our thoughts are linked to the invisible energy that makes up all of that is, and they help mold it into that which we experience on the physical plane. And there's the real humdinger. Universal intelligence and your thoughts are basically the same force. Just as the water droplet that lands in the ocean is part of the whole sea, so your thoughts exist as part of the universal intelligence. In other words, you are one powerful motherfucker. And then it says the invisible world creates your visible world. So I guess that quote is essentially just what I was just talking about, is whatever you think, all of your thoughts basically shape your reality. So think you're pretty, think you're rich, think you're doing those things. When you start thinking those things, then you start acting that way, and then it becomes more and more of your reality piece by piece. So moving on to outgoing thoughts. On page 55, she has a quote that says, "Universal intelligence created all that is and all that will be, and your thoughts are how you use your free will to harness the power of universal intelligence to mold your reality." If you send out thoughts like, "I can't afford to go on a vacation and I don't see that changing anytime soon," the universe is just like, "Noted, you can't afford it, and stuck at home it is." Just as your thoughts created the financial reality you're experiencing right now, you can also use them to overpower what is to manifest whatever reality you set your mind to. And so this goes back to, what do you align yourself with? This is what I was talking about with the vibrating early on. Like, what do you want to align yourself with, and what do you feel worthy of? And the universe, the universe intelligence is essentially saying you tell the universe what you want, and you prove that you're worthy of it in terms of aligning yourself with that lifestyle or with the items that you're looking for, and the universe will come back to you. And I thought this was interesting because I always, from even like a young age, I would always tell myself, like, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be wealthy. Like, I can just feel it, but I don't know how. I know I'm going to be rich someday, but I don't know how. And I know I'm going to make a big impact someday, but I don't know how. And I just had this like gut feeling that I had it in me to be really successful in terms of building my wealth. And I never knew how. And so I felt like, even though I felt this impulse of like, oh, I'm going to be wealthy, I didn't feel wealthy then. I felt really poor. I was taking out tons of student debt to just go to college, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I just went to business school in hopes that it would lead me to where I wanted to be. And I didn't exactly have a plan, nor did I have a vision of what I needed to do to become wealthy. And the more that was my reality, the more I treated myself that way. The more I just was like, okay, let's use my freshman year of college, for example. What is the stereotype? Like, broke freshman college, dorm life, like tired because you're working all the time. And those are like the norms, the stereotype. So I held myself to that standard. I was working late nights, going to school early mornings, had no time for myself, was taking out student loans just to afford to go to school, and also held myself to that standard of like young, dumb, and broke, essentially. And that's how I treated myself. And that's obviously how people surrounding me treated me. Now, I can't go back to freshman year and think what could have been different or how would that change my reality, but I can think to when I started to change my reality, and it essentially was, I am smart and I'm way too smart to be doing things the wrong way. And the biggest moment when I realized I was doing things the wrong way is when I bought my first house. And I bought my first house for $550,000. And my monthly mortgage was about $3,300. And I'm just going to be honest, I don't really feel like that was comfortable for us. Yeah, we could do it, but it led us to not doing as many fun things as we were doing before owning a house. We didn't have as much money to go to like Disneyland every week or to just do whatever we wanted to do. We didn't have like that excess of money. And it really started to put me in the scarcity mindset in terms of wow, how come I never have money? How come, like, we used to have money and then we, like, leveled up in life, so I thought, getting a house, and then now we don't have money and we can't spend it on all this fun stuff. And then all of a sudden, I realized that I've just been doing life kind of all wrong and doing it the traditional way, like going to university, taking out student loans to go to university, getting a $550,000 loan that I couldn't afford really, and making that my life, and then living essentially paycheck to paycheck and not doing all the fun things that I wanted to do in my life. And it became very apparent to me that I bought a living liability, and that is the house. And a lot of people say, like, housing market is always an asset. The houses you own are assets, not liabilities. And, it's really easy. You go take one accounting class, week 1, accounting 101, and they teach you that anything that you essentially pay for is a liability and anything that makes you money is an asset. And I realized really soon that I'm paying so much money to live in this house, and it's a walking liability. At any moment, the roof can go wrong, the plumbing can go wrong, which it did, and all of this stuff can go wrong, and I'm spending more money to take care of it, and it's not making me money in any way. And this is when me and my husband sat down and we really thought about it, and we were like, what do we do with this liability? My house was gorgeous. My house was the biggest house I've ever lived in my entire life. And it was my dream house at the time because it was all white, quartz, big. I always hosted the Christmases, the Thanksgiving, the parties. I loved my house, but it was just a liability. And it started making me think essentially, it just started making me think how can I turn this liability into an asset? And I'll go into all of this later. I feel like I'm getting a little off track, but essentially that is how I decided to sell my house of the liability and buy an investment property of an asset. And even though I'm going from $550 to now $1 million, I'm making money on my $1 million house when I was losing money on my $500,000 house. And there's kind of that mindset. And now I feel so proud of myself. It was a lot of energy to convince myself to sell my house, but I knew it was a step I needed to build to buy my first investment property and start getting my foot in the door and investing in real estate and building my wealth. And that was something that I needed to do, and it was hard, but now with I feel like I'm getting so sidetracked. I just need to debrief. But essentially, that is my narrative, is that I wanted to be a respectable person to myself, and I felt like I was too smart to be acting so dumb, in the sense of I knew I wanted to be wealthy, I knew I wanted to invest, and just always telling myself I don't know how, when in reality I did know how, I just didn't want to do it. But now I finally took the step to do it, and now it's becoming my reality, and now I can see such a more clear version of how I'm going to be wealthy, instead of always being I don't know, maybe one day I'll be wealthy, or I can feel it, but I don't know how it's going to happen. Now I'm I can feel it, and now I'm going to start putting action steps to make it happen. I feel like that was a weird spill, and I don't feel like I brought it all the way home, so I hope it makes sense. Let's just continue on if you have questions about it. I feel like I just want to make a whole podcast on how I invested in how I invested $1 million into real estate, and kind of talk about that journey in the other podcast. I don't want to say too much right now, but I already feel like I said too much. Anyway, moving on. So on page 56, it says, your thoughts alert a universal intelligence to start arranging the energy in such a way as you make your desires manifest in physical form. You need to learn how to see and receive the new opportunities that will lead you to your goal, which we will go over more deeply later. So continuing on with the manifesting and building your wealth in terms of owning, feeling it, and just being what you want to be. The things that you want in life already exist. And the examples that I used is the investment property that I'm buying right now was built almost 100 years ago. And that meant that this house has lived almost 80 years longer than I have, and has been on this planet 80 years more than me, and it already existed my entire life. My entire life, this house has already existed. It wasn't until I started manifesting this exact house into my life. This exact house, I knew what I wanted from an investment property. I knew what it looked like. I just hadn't seen it yet. And then once I seen it, I just knew. I was like, that's a house. That's obviously my first investment house. And it just kind of shows that, like, I lived my entire life not thinking about it, not manifesting it, not aligning myself with this house. And then one day I finally was like, I want to start finding this house. And then that came to me and this house suddenly having this relationship and making this deal happen. That is one example. The other example I use is like a Tesla. I use this example all the time because the Tesla was the first thing in my life that I really wanted so bad that I tried manifesting. And I manifested this car for so long, probably since I was in high school. I've always been like, I want a Tesla, whatever. And the car was built in 2020, but I didn't get it until 2022. So it's like that car already existed and I was manifesting it to myself. So those are just a couple examples. I put a few more, but you get the idea of just whatever you want in life, it probably already exists. The money you want in your life already exists. The things you want in your life already exist. Whether it's you want to build a house, the supplies to build the house already exist. So how are you going to align yourself with those things that already exist so that way you can have a relationship with the things you want in your life? All food for thought, but very interesting. So think about it and then message me what are things that you want in your life and what are you going to start manifesting back to you. So on page 57, she says, when you consciously focus your thoughts on the wealth you desire, imagine yourself rolling around on a big old leaf of Benjamins. Feel how right and good and exciting it feels to be in a financial flow. You arrange the energy around you and within you to vibrate at a high frequency. And as a result, your reality mirrors back to you high frequency opportunities and things. And essentially, that's just adding to what we've just been talking about. It's when I wanted my first house, my 550 house, I remember wanting that house so bad. But the reasons I wanted that house are a lot different for why I want a house today. The reasons when I was buying my 550 house was because I wanted my first home. I wanted to feed my inner child the beautiful house that I didn't have as a kid. And I wanted it so bad for me because at the time that's what I wanted and that's what I needed to make myself feel good. And we did like silly manifest. Not silly, but I wasn't taking manifesting seriously, but we did manifest it. We like wrote on the whiteboard, like, we will get this house, blah, 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 blah. And the universe was like, okay, if that's the house you want, bet. So I got that house. And then all of a sudden, when it came to the end of it, I needed to get out of that house so bad because it was essentially draining my energy. It was draining my financials and it wasn't making me feel good. And it wasn't exactly the life I imagined. And so then I sold the house, and now the difference is now I want to buy my investment property. And now it's a lot different why I want this house. The reason I want this house so bad is to have my first investment property that will make enough money to buy my second, and then my third, and then my fourth. And that's kind of where I'm going. So my intentions are a lot different now, but I'm manifesting it in such a different, more intentional way that I'm aligning myself with these two houses in such different reasons why I wanted them, but I aligned myself with those things at the time. I got on that same vibrating level, and now here I am. I got both houses in my lifetime, but that's just because at different times I was manifesting them and vibrating at those levels. So I guess like what I'm saying is like things that you manifest in your life, whether you're doing it intentionally or not intentionally, remember the things you say and manifest. Oh, I'm broke, I'm fat, I'm this, whatever. Whether you choose to manifest them, you're not manifesting them intentionally, you're still manifesting them. So you're putting them out in the universe and that stuff is still going to come back to you. So be careful what you're saying out loud. But then the thought is, even if things that you manifest in your life you no longer want, it's okay to no longer want those things. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to level up. So don't be afraid to make mistakes when you're manifesting, in terms of like, oh, I manifested this. Whether it's like your dream job. Let's say you're like manifesting this job. You thought it was like the it job. You like thought like, my life will be perfect once I have this job. So you manifest it, and then you get in that job, and a year later you realize you hate it. You hate the hours. You don't like who you've become. Blah, 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 blah. It's okay to manifest something different and to move on, because at the time that's what you wanted, but just because it no longer aligns with you and it no longer is vibrating at that frequency you need it to be, move on. And so I guess I just wanted to make that little like note of like what you think manifests, and it's okay to kind of like come back and change your mind and manifest your new reality and your new narrative. Okay. And then the second half of this book is quick because she just talks about incoming thoughts. And essentially this is when she talks about your intuition, your synchronicity, your inspiration, desire, coincidence, and so on. So when you're manifesting, those are all 5 things that could be cues of you manifesting correctly. So let's talk first about your intuition. So that gut feeling, she describes it of like, I should buy this house, even though it costs way more than what I want to spend, it feels right. So we've all felt that intuition of our gut telling us like, my gut says no, my gut says this. And everyone's like, follow your gut, and that's your intuition talking to you. And essentially that is your intuition aligning yourself with the universal intelligence that she's referencing in this book. Synchronicity. I wonder what ever happened to Janet from cooking class. Oh, look, there she is calling me right now. And we've all heard the like, oh, speaking of the devil, like, I was just talking about you, or your ears must have been ringing, or I was just thinking of you, whatever. Some people call it like coincidence, other people call it synchronicity. And then inspiration. Check out this awesome idea for a song that just popped into my head out of nowhere. So we've all had those moments where we watched a video of someone like, I don't know, someone like losing weight, and then you feel inspired to also lose weight. And that inspiration is essentially you aligning your vibrations and your intentions with losing weight. You want to align yourself with the celebratory of that person that just lost weight, and you also want to lose weight. So you're aligning yourself with that, and then slowly but surely, if you align it, you think it, you feel it, you own it, you too will also lose weight. That's kind of the idea, the bring it home moment. And then desire. I just know I'm meant to be rich, even though none of my screenplays have sold yet. So again, like I said, since I was little or young, I would say maybe around like high school is when I really started to feel this way. Even middle school, because I remember in middle school, we had to like write a report on like what you wanted to be when you grew up. And I remember I just Googled like what career makes the most amount of money. And it was like environmental engineer. And I was like, that's what I want to be. So I guess maybe from a young age, I just was already like really on my mindset of like, how do I make the most amount of money? But that desire is in me. And just because that desire is in me, that desire lives within me. I think it aligns with a lot of things that I want in my life. It allows me to meet a lot of business people. It allows me to like invest and move on and really start aligning myself with things that will make me build my long-term wealth. And then the last thing she says is via coincidence. I just opened a book to the perfect page. It's exactly what I needed. And eventually, I guess essentially what she's saying is like, yes, it's coincidence, but that's you aligning yourself with the universal intelligence. So that is essentially what she talked about all in this chapter. And I feel like I went off on a lot of rants and I used a lot of my own personal examples, and I hope they were helpful and not coming across as like braggy. I know that's like my own insecurity, so I should probably like let that go. Like, I'm not sure if anyone thinks it's coming off as braggy, but it is like an insecurity of mine, which in this book it tells you can't be insecure about talking about money. So it's not an insecurity of mine. I love talking about money and sharing with others how I'm making money and how I continue and plan to build my wealth. So that's me intentionally manifesting my reality of me sharing how I build my wealth and sharing it with people, so it comes back to me. Anyway, that is the chapter, and I used a lot of examples, but I want you to not only listen to my examples, but really start thinking inward. What are my examples, and how can I relate Taylor's examples to my own life? I don't know everyone's personal life listening to this podcast right now, but I do know that anybody and everybody can listen to this podcast and make it their own. What is going on in your life right now that maybe your narrative isn't the narrative that you want anymore? And if that's how it is, what can you do to change your narrative? Whatever's going on in your life, things you can do to change your narrative. Change your thoughts, change the way you think about yourself, think about others, think about your narrative entirely. Then that changes your words, how you talk about yourself, how you talk about others, how you talk about your reality, and then change your actions. So how am I going to act different? How am I going to start teaching people to be different? And essentially, that's just the first steps I would encourage you to take, is just try it. Try thinking different, try feeling different, try speaking different, and then your actions will follow. And really have the narrative that you want to be held to, because how you perceive yourself is essentially the respect and the expectation you put on yourself for others to treat you. So if you want to be a well-known, if you want to just perceive yourself, like let's use this example right now. If I want to perceive myself as a successful podcaster, I need to act like a successful podcaster and portray that to you as my listener and make you feel confident and make you feel almost as if like, oh, Taylor's been doing this her whole life, even though we're only on episode 28, and it's because I do feel like a successful podcaster. I tell people all the time I have a podcast, and at first it started as like a fun passion project, but the longer I've done it, the more I've been able to take it a little bit more serious and really see the value in what it is to be a podcaster. And now I say like, oh yeah, I have a podcast, because I do, and my reality is that I am successful at maintaining a successful podcast with an audience that is listening to me weekly, and I appreciate you and value you. But it's just an example of like, what is your narrative? What do you want to be? And holding yourself to that standard so others can hold the same respect and standard that you wish to be held to. So it's a good chapter. I'm glad I didn't skip over it too much and go straight to chapter 3. Thank you to the listener who recommended me to really dive a little bit deeper in this chapter. I appreciate it, and I will always listen to your feedback as listeners. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, or just you want to chat with me, again, at Taylor_Rockwell on Instagram. I love hearing from you guys. And that's it for today's book club. What are your thoughts? And what did you take away from today's episode? I will see you next week, and we will dive into chapter 3. If you want to get this book, I will leave a link down below for you to read. I know that there's an audio version as well on YouTube that I can also link down below so you can find it. It is like a little robotic voice, but it's still the voice if you want to listen to the book and read it entirely through. If not, I will be here next episode, and I will talk as much in detail as I can about the chapter and really dissect the points and talk about them in a more in-depth level if you don't want to read the book, so you can fully still understand these episodes. I thank you all for listening. I really do appreciate it. It means the world. And I will be doing a tour of the tiny house soon, because I know this is such a cute little glimpse and I want to show you more. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with me today, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.